I'll just say that I was at a recent neighborhood devotional gathering. And during the devotions, one of the participants shared a hadith, which included the phrase, "The Prophet Muhammad was known to have said, 'Beauty is on the tip of the tongue.'" In the ensuing conversation after the prayers, someone reflected on this phrase, noting the irony that right now much of what we hear in the US is not so beautiful, and then asked, how can we work to contribute more beauty into the world and into conversations? And I think this is what our speaker, Jesse Washington, will help us reflect on. How do we understand deeply the discourses unfolding in America today? And how do we help contribute in a way that restores beauty without being naive or removed from things like history and nuance? Jesse will help us understand this through the lens of his areas of expertise, the discourses on race, politics, and media. Jesse Washington is a Philadelphia-based journalist who has written about race throughout his 3-decade-long journalism career. Currently, he writes for ESPN's The Undefeated, which explores intersections of race, sports, and culture. He's written for Business Week magazine, the New York Times, and from 2008 to 2015, he was the national writer on race and ethnicity for the Associated Press. Jesse has also served as managing editor of Vibe magazine and was the founding editor-in-chief of Blaze magazine, which is a spin-off of Vibe. And he's also published a novel called Black Will Shoot. Jesse started a company with his father, Bunch Washington, that published 2 coffee table books on Black artists, Ramir Burden and Elizabeth Catlett. And I wanted to say that Jesse's father, Bunch Washington, was also a Black artist and a Bahá'í. And there's a book on Bunch's art, and in the introduction of the book, it says, were he alive today, Bunch Washington would urge us, one and all, to use his life story and also his art as a springboard for reflection about America's most challenging and divisive issues. As a journalist, Jesse's art is his word, and similar to his father, his words are a springboard for reflection about America's most challenging and divisive issues and how the revelation of Baha'u'llah can help us move forward. So please join me in welcoming Jesse Washington to the stage.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? It's great to be here. I'm still tripping. I get to go after Ambassador Andrew Young. They didn't tell me that part. So no pressure. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but was he trying to get at me? He was trying to come. And then he just bounced. He's out. So I was ready. Maybe not, you know. But no, a tremendous privilege to be here and to be with all of you. And, you know, it's not often that I get around as many Baha'is are just in the corner of this room, let alone the whole group. And it really helps me to think about things in a new way and pushes me to just really deepen myself. So I want to thank the organizers of the conference for having me here. You know, when you spend a lot of time in non-Baha'i spaces, you can kind of get caught up in it and just, you know, and in sports, it's very competitive, and I'm a basketball guy. And so the basketball court, and I still play a lot, and it's one of the toughest places, just sports in general, and me being you know, holding on to being an athlete, it's hard to just maintain my Baha'i identity, especially with basketball, because hoops is really all about, you know, like conquering and domination and things like that, which is, that I haven't read that in the writings recently. So it helps me to be here, you know, and I try even, like basketball is kind of like my petri dish, because if I can be Baha'i on the basketball court, then I know I'm doing okay, and I try to draw inspiration from people. Anybody here friends with Michael Penn, brother Michael Penn? Y'all know Michael? Right. So Michael is like he's going to be my basketball like ideal, because if I'm on the court, I think about how he would approach a basketball game. Instead of like scowling and everything, he'd be like, "My dear brother, it's so wonderful to see you on the court today. May I take this opportunity to inform you that should you attempt to score on my goal, with the utmost attitude of humility and deference, I will be forced to reject that attempt. And furthermore, should you attempt to, at the culmination of this contest, accumulate more points than I have, I will forcefully but gently reject that attempt as well. To the gates of the Abha kingdom will resound." So that's my goal. It's going to be me. ESPN, new show coming up. So yes, I am a journalist. I've been a journalist since 1987. I was 18 years old, and I got my first job then. And I've had various positions writing and managing in different places that they've mentioned in the gracious introduction. JJ, thank you. And I always wrote about race, and my dad, who you heard about, Bunch Washington, had a very strong racial consciousness. He would ride the subway in New York City in a full African robe and hat, and he was from Philadelphia. But, but it was, the images that he put in his art were very black and very African. And so I was always interested. So even though my jobs were not specifically covering race until later in my career, I always wrote about it. And it was something that I felt compelled to do. And so, but most germane, I think, to this conversation tonight is my experiences starting in the summer of 2008, because that's when, after a series of jobs that I had at the Associated Press, I got the opportunity to cover the race beat. And this was when then Senator Obama was running for president. And just to kind of sum up the way I was thinking, and I think the majority of black people were thinking about race at that time, it was Christmas 2007, so in less than a year we would have the election of the first black president. And we have a big family gathering. I have a lot of Christians in my extended family and everything, and so we'd all get around, a bunch of smart people talking about race. My brother-in-law, very educated guy, "Yeah, Obama, you think he could win?" I was like, "No way. Why not? He's black." And my brother-in-law was like, "Yeah, you're right. What time the football game? Come on." Like, it wasn't even a question. I was convinced that America was not ready to elect a black president. It would not, simply for the reason that he was black. And so that kind of tells you about correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not, but most black people thought that way. America's not electing no black person, period, no way, no how. And so what does that say about our mentality? What does that say about us as black people, how we viewed the rest of the country, our level of distrust and suspicion? We overestimated the amount of racism in America, which is, for good reason, but still. So I had that job until I covered Obama's first election, covered his second election, and in December 2015, I left to work for The Undefeated, covering the intersections of race and sports and culture, things like that. So by definition, for more than the past 10 years, my job has been to engage in the national discourse on race and racial justice. That's what I've been doing. So over my career, there's been profound changes in journalism. He mentioned that I work for Business Week magazine. Imagine the concept of getting your news once a week and it being relevant. That just tells you that how much things have changed. Now, forget a week, an hour, we're on social media like minute by minute, like what I miss. So social media has really changed a lot of what we do, and it's changed the way we all experience the media. Speaking of which, let me get this shot for the gram real quick, you know what I'm saying? Instagram, get my followers up. You know what I mean, real quick. I'm not joking, I'm gonna. Yeah. All right, thank you. But even like social media has even changed the nature of these websites. Even websites are becoming a little more passé. Most of news traffic now comes through social media. That's how we consume our news. That's where we go to look to be informed in what's going on in the world. And I think later on we'll discuss how that has profound implications for the nature of the discourse. So this is what I observe as the current framework for journalism on racial issues. Number one, we all know that Americans in general are becoming more secular and having much more distance between themselves and religion, between themselves and God. Pew Research study from 2007 to 2014, the percentage of Americans who do not believe in a particular religion or religion at all grew from 14 to 23% from 2007 to 2014. And this decline in religious belief crosses all areas of age and religious affiliation. Second, we know as Bahá'ís that the chaos and dysfunction in society is increasing. This is what the Universal House of Justice calls, quote, the devastating forces of disintegration, and these forces tend to sweep away barriers that block humanity's progress. So, our society is suffering, our society is looking for solutions and failing to find those solutions in God or religion. God has become an abstract concept rather than being manifested by a tangible, specific set of guidance and instructions. And so therefore, Americans who are suffering under racial injustice, from social injustice, all these prejudices that we are afflicted with, they turn to politics as being perceived as the only solution, because what else is there? Many people say America is a Christian nation, but there are some people standing in the way of racial progress who cling the tightest and proclaim themselves to be the real Christians. So if you look towards, if you look towards religion, spirituality, God as the solution, well, how can that be the solution when these people are the problem? And so politics is seen as the only way, or at the very least, the most effective way to change society. And so those of us who are trying to create more racial progress, to fight for racial justice, a lot of these people in this community of very well-meaning and well-intentioned folks use politics. If you think about some of the biggest names today, and even for the past few decades, seeking equal opportunity, and I don't like to say equal rights, because legally we have equal rights, but the way that those rights are administered is not equal, and the opportunity to achieve those rights is not equal. So I like to say equal opportunity. The people who are seeking equal opportunity for all, and particularly for African Americans, who are these biggest names? It's the Black Lives Matter folks most recently. There's a lot of names that we all know from that movement. The NAACP, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Van Jones, Charles Blow, my colleague Jamel Hill, LeBron James. These are all people who are fighting for equality, and we all know exactly how they vote. They all use a political platform, and they attack those who are, quote, on the other side. Now, I don't want people to confuse what I'm saying, that politics is bad and evil and we should, not have it, because there are many wonderful people involved in politics and doing essential work, including some of the people that I just mentioned. And the concept of politics itself in our writings is stated to be a necessary part of how society is organized and how it functions. But I think that we all recognize that today we've reached a point of peak political polarization, and perhaps we've gotten to the point of no return. I think it's given, especially that Ambassador Young was here earlier, it's definitely worth reflecting on that era of the movement. And two things really stand out to me. Number one, the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, which I really consider to be like the modern Bill of Rights. And the architects of that movement were also America's founding fathers. And so that legislation was passed with bipartisan support. It wasn't just down the aisle and we're going to fight it out that way. And Martin Luther King studiously avoided any political endorsements or affiliations whatsoever. And I'm not sure that historians are really certain how he voted or if. And that civil rights movement, King's movement, Ambassador Young's movement, had the most success of any social revolution in American history. And when it comes to racial progress, one might argue the only success, because everything that came next did not result in the gains that we saw from the civil rights movement of the 60s. And the original civil rights movement was fundamentally based on spiritual principles. And so, how does this dynamic show up in journalism today? How does it apply to what's going on in the media right now? So first, I'd like to establish something as there is no such thing as objective journalism. I think that's a myth, always has been, and we're just coming to grips with that fact right now. Now, it's not a bad thing, it's just a human thing, because everything about journalism is subjective. The story that I choose to write is based on what myself feels is important and interesting to me, and what my editors think, oh yeah, that's worth you spending your time on, and what we'll pay to have you pursue. And my choice of what questions to ask people, my choice of what idea or quote to put at the top of the story versus way down at the bottom are all subjective decisions. So there's no objectivity to it. The most important thing is not to be objective, but to be fair. And so we're going to get into that more, and that's one of the things that we can do more, is to recognize how we feel about things and then make sure that that doesn't affect our ability to do things in a positive and constructive way. So there's no objective journalism, so every media outlet today is on a political side. And in fact, we're creating media outlets to deliver and to cater to a political side. This applies to newspapers, TV networks, websites, Twitter accounts, and a lot of journalists get lumped in that also, either overtly or just because of who you work for, because people want information that confirms what they already believe, instead of searching for the truth that is out there and challenging their own assumptions. Another factor that's going on in the media right now, with race in particular, is the blurring between opinion and straight reporting. Because on the internet, there's no section of the newspaper, it's just the internet. And it's all delivered, it all comes at you in the same stream of information. I'm sorry, for those of you who still read the newspaper, I apologize. We love you. Get a smartphone. I deliver the newspaper. I have a subscription to the newspaper, and I make my kids read it every day. And once they're done with the comics, they're gone. Because the comics don't really work on like a phone. That's one thing for the newspaper. So you've got this going on in the media, in the polarization of the media, the political affiliations of the media, and then you have the election of the last two presidents, which has forced us, America, to reckon with race and these problems that they've just brought back up to the surface. We thought they were over. We thought, though, we moved past it. But really, they were there all along. So these last two elections have ripped off the Band-Aid, and the wound was not only not healed, but it's festering now. And that's what we're really dealing with when it comes to the media and politics and race. And the sum total is that almost everything about racial issues today and racial justice is viewed through a political lens. And so this is how I see it playing out in the media. The media does a story or a broadcast or report, here is an injustice. And it falls into one of two categories. It's an instance of brutality or discrimination. An unarmed black person is killed for no good reason. Or a young black kid someone calls the police because he was selling lemonade, or things like that. Look at this instance of injustice. This is terrible. The second type of report that will be, the injustice that will be highlighted in the media is systemic. Oh, look at how black people have to pay higher mortgage rates than similarly qualified white buyers. Oh, look at these black defendants who are getting longer sentences even though other defendants who've committed the same crime with the same histories get lesser sentences. So that's the second kind of injustice that will be highlighted in the media. Because we in the media, we love conflict. If there's a problem, there's a story. Let's get it. And it's an unfortunate byproduct of what we do. And so in this coverage next, we'll like kind of referee or host an argument or a debate over the cause of the injustice. Who's to blame? And so then we'll go to get both sides, get someone from the other side What did the opponents say? And so everything is framed in a conflicting situation. And frequently, the people who we will go to for these explanations to argue their side are politicians. And right now, I see both political parties using racial divisions to cast blame for racial problems. And they cast the blame on the people who don't vote for them. And please note that I said both political parties do this. Because it's really tempting sometimes, and we all have our individual decisions to make politically on how we want to vote and what we want to support the politicians, because we can vote and we should. But at the same time, I think that we really have to challenge our own assumptions about all of the actions that are going on and what really goes into all of these political campaigns and machinations and battles and fights. And I use these type of aggressive words deliberately. So the media will talk about the solutions then to these injustices, which are limited to political means. What type of policies can we enact to solve this problem? What type of budgets can we get? What type of laws? What type of elections can we win? Oh, affirmative action. We need affirmative action. Well, then we got to get the right people in office to put the right people on the Supreme Court, and so on and so forth. So this is all in a context of conflict. The words that we hear in the media that when we do our jobs is, well, make sure you get the opposing point of view. Okay, well, we're fighting for these rights. Go get a quote from the other side. What does the opposition say? I agree wholeheartedly with Ambassador Young that there's too much anger in the media. This is how we express ourselves. It's hard not to get angry, but it's not the solution. And I think we have a lot of guidance to the effect of how we're supposed to respond with constructive resilience, even to the worst type of oppression and racism and opposition to human rights. So in the media, most of these successful broadcasts, columnists, individuals thrive on arguments and conflict. The nature of our discourse, even among those who are trying to achieve equality, is to attack and to disrespect. Some of the most prominent media figures today are very popular for a lot of the stuff that they put on social media, excoriating those with whom they disagree and using very disrespectful language and saying how bad other people are and pointing out all of their worst faults. And these are the type of posts, especially on social media, that get the most attention, that get the most retweets, that build up your followers, which translates to prestige and more money on your next contract and a bigger audience. So it's attractive for the media to feed this type of environment because it pays in terms of audience, dollars, and attention. So this is where we are, and I think that this point is beyond adequate. It's perfectly summed up by a letter from the House of Justice in February 2018 to a believer who was concerned with the Baha'i community and how we were interacting with the issue of racism and what we were doing. And the letter says, "The current polarization in American society makes constructive dialogue and action ever more elusive. Even those fair-minded individuals who long to free themselves and their society from this problem, surely a vast portion of the nation, are paralyzed and divided by their divergent views, unable to create the unity necessary to advance along the path of constructive change." So I think that if we're not careful, we as Baha'is can fall into the category of those who are unable to create the unity that's necessary for change. In the past, for example, people of color had needed to call out racism. And that's still a theme in today's media coverage. But today, and I'm going to paraphrase some guidance from the Universal House of Justice, and I think it's also something that speaks to the wisdom of Ambassador Young. He mentioned the same concept a few minutes ago. Racism is so much more complex. It's more embedded in the psyche of the population, frequently in an unconscious manner, where we don't even know that we're making these judgments. So it's harder to identify, let alone to do something about it. And we all have these biases. One of my favorite stories is I was racially profiled by my own wife one time, who is black, and I had dropped the car off to get something done to it. And I'm walking home, and it was raining, and I had the hoodie up, and I'm walking down the street, and I see her pull out of the driveway, and she pulls up next to me. She's laughing, and I was like, "What's so funny?" She said, "Man, I saw you." I was like, "What is that dude doing in our neighborhood?" True story. So a lot of what's going on now, it was a unconscious reaction that she had, just a snap judgment. So a lot of this is what we see going on. It's hard to get into these issues. It's not like the dogs and the fire hoses, and so it's tougher to deal with. It's more nuanced. It requires more care. So depending how you do it, calling out racism now, pointing the finger at people can be counterproductive if you alienate the people that you want to awaken and help. Ambassador Young mentioned that he had to go and talk to the people who were the problem. P.W. Botha? Wow. I mean, these are the architects and the caretakers of white supremacy. Today in the media and in race relations, we're at a point where people won't even go talk to, I'm not going to sit down and talk to you. I've seen many prominent media figures say, if you voted for fill in the blank candidate, don't talk to me. I have no use for you. So we have to choose our words carefully when we're dealing with these issues so as to create more unity and not division. And so as journalists, and as myself as a journalist, I really try to take that to heart every day. One of my favorite quotes from The Blessed Beauty, which I have on the wall in my office at home, says this: "Every word is endowed with a spirit. Therefore, the speaker or expounder should carefully deliver his words at the appropriate time and place. For the impression which each word maketh is clearly evident and perceptible. An enlightened man of wisdom should primarily speak with words as mild as milk, that the children of men may be nurtured and edified, and may attain the ultimate goal of human existence, which is the station of true understanding and nobility. It behooveth a prudent man of wisdom to speak with utmost leniency and forbearance, so that the sweetness of his words may induce everyone to attain that which befitteth man's station." Words as mild as milk, words that nurture and edify, lenience, forbearance, sweetness. This is not what we get from the media today, particularly when it comes to race. So with that in mind, here are some of the things that I try to do in my job to help the situation. When I first started covering race for the AP, I got a pretty good piece of advice from one of my editors who said, "You cover race, not racism." And there's a difference. So, yes, there are certain times when things need to be pointed out and injustices need to be raised, but go deeper than that. Look beyond that. So I started to explore different experiences and especially different perspectives. And I started to talk to people who may have on the surface appear to be opposed to racial progress, or talk to people who support policies who may appear to hold us back. And I was told point blank by many of my colleagues, a few of my colleagues at the Associated Press, don't talk to certain people. This person over here, you should not talk to them. They're bad. They're against us. And certainly don't quote them in stories. Recently, there's been some outrage that you might have noticed about the New York Times and other publications who are daring to write in a neutral fashion about white supremacists. And some of these publications are catching flack for hiring certain opinion columnists because they're too conservative. So when the New York Times is criticized as too liberal, that's when you know you're really in a new place, a new age of polarization, or maybe subpolarization. Because if there's one thing that the New York Times is not, it's conservative. So I've tried to get out of my comfort zone and to talk to people who do not think like me. So here's one experience that I had that I've carried with me for quite some years, and it's had posed a huge challenge for me and also presented me with a huge opportunity for growth. Remember when Obama first got elected, and then Henry Louis Gates, the esteemed black scholar of an advanced and gray-haired age, was arrested for breaking into his own home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I did an article, and it was basically the first big racial controversy of Obama's presidency. And for a moment, he slipped off his racial tightrope and made a comment which let us know, yes, Obama is a real black guy. And he said, the police acted stupidly. Oh, you would have thought that the missiles were in the air and on their way. And it was a big story. And so I wrote a series of, I did a couple of stories on it, and then I did one which really laid out kind of the thought process between the police officer and Gates. And if you really dug into it, both of them sort of made sense. And so it was a remarkably balanced story, so balanced that it was printed in the New York Post, which is not known for balance. Sorry, that was a shot. I apologize. That was divisive and and aggressive. But blame it on the basketball. What I'm trying to say is that this was a really balanced story, and I've received a lot of compliments about how, wow, you really did a great job of showing the nuance of this situation. You saw both sides. Great job. And then I got a phone call. Someone left a message on my office answer machine that said, your story was on the front page of my paper down here in South Carolina. I can't believe how you would say these things, and how you must be some sort of black radical. What's your problem? Here's my number. So I called him up. Hey, this is Jesse. And we started talking. And this guy was pretty out there and had some very strong beliefs, which I found, quite honestly, dangerous and repugnant. And I'm still having conversations with this person to this day. It's easy for y'all to clap because you don't have to have the conversations. We're going to, this individual, his name is Jim, and we're going to call him my friend Jim, because through it all, I really try to maintain, yes, I want to be his friend. I want to act as I'm instructed to act towards everyone, towards all humanity. And I have learned a lot from my friend Jim. I've learned a lot about not only how that this type of person thinks, and he's an older white gentleman, a veteran of a foreign war, and owner of many guns, and other things. So, and at his heart, a good guy. Good person. He's also a racist. He believes that, and I've come to find, I've resisted it for several years, but through just gentle questioning and I've literally exchanged thousands of emails with this person. And he believes that black people are inherently, because of their own decisions and their own fault, worse than white folks. And yet we continue to have this dialogue. So it's not easy. How do we deal with deeply flawed, racist ideas with love and patience? That is the challenge that I have as a black journalist right now. Because every day we're encountering a lot of really terrible things. And how do you maintain what we are instructed to have, which is a spirit of love and patience and forbearance and meekness and humility? Here's a recent message from my friend Jim, day before yesterday. I can't remember what started the conversation. Usually it's something that he watches on a network that shall not be named. This is Jim. We are tired of being accused of being prejudiced and racist towards blacks. We are tired of hearing about these make-believe barriers that stymie black opportunity. We are tired of hearing that the judicial system is unfair when blacks per capita commit the majority of the crime that end in incarceration. We are tired of hearing about how blacks don't get a fair shot at a good education because of teacher quality or schools. We are tired of hearing how the whites dug all those pretend holes and put blacks in them. So, this is my friend Jim, and I have sometimes failed to act and use the proper words that we discussed earlier, but the process of engaging with this individual, of understanding his worldview, why he feels that way, has honestly elevated my ability to do my job. And I think if more of us in the media took the time to actually listen to other people, then that is one of the keys and one of the things that we have to do to move forward with racial relations. So the House of Justice has instructed us here in America who are engaged in racial justice issues to look to the Baha'is in Iran and how they've responded to that life-threatening persecution with constructive resilience, which is this. From the House of Justice, the proper response to oppression is neither to succumb in resignation nor to take on the characteristics of the oppressor. The victim of oppression can transcend it through an inner strength that shields the soul from bitterness and hatred and which sustains consistent, principled action. So that's my challenge as a journalist. And this effort has personally pushed me to raise my level of spirituality and of understanding. Specifically, how do I do this in my work? I try to explore more solutions than problems. I think we all know by now that there's a lot of racist stuff going on. For me to point out these instances, we've been there, done that. What are the solutions? Who has ideas about what can be done? What are they doing? There are lots of people of all political persuasions doing things in the community to help others. Get into those. Look for the good news. One example is I did a story right before I left the Associated Press about an issue that gets a lot of black folks nervous in the racial justice community because this topic is used as a weapon, and it's crime in the black community. Black people killing black people. Now, we all know that the reason why that there's an excess of violence among black folks is because of oppression, and because they've been mistreated, miseducated, had no opportunity, and then families fell apart, locked up a whole generation of us. When they come out of jail, they can't live a productive life, and this is what happens. So we know that that's the case, but a lot of people like to weaponize this scenario, like to use it as some sort of fake evidence of a false black pathology. That is not the case. However, I found a black newspaper full of black people who love the black community, who are writing about this issue, who are crusading about this issue. And let's be honest, this is an issue that we need to address. And Quiet as Kept, the black community has been addressing violence in the black community for years now, and it has decreased incredibly, which a lot of people might be surprised to know. So I was able to write about how the black community internally is dealing with one of our serious problems, something that's costing us, unfortunately, much more lives than police brutality against black Americans. But I was able to frame it from a perspective of love rather than divisiveness or accusatory rhetoric from a political nature. The people who were running this paper were probably conservative, but yet they had an evident love for their community, and I tried to bring that out in the work. Another thing that I try to do is include Baha'i perspectives in the topics that I cover, and once in a while I'll even slip it in just through the type of language that you use, or remember what I mentioned before, the choice of people that you choose to interview. In 2012, I was assigned a story to the media loves to like definitively answer these very vague and nebulous questions. Jesse, go write a story, have race relations proved under Obama. Yeah, they're all solved. We're good. I'm done. I need a new beat. So I called up a lot of you probably know William Smith, Smitty, from the Race Amity Initiative, and I got a few quotes from him. And then, so I was able to quote Smitty as mentioning the idea that, well, we have an opportunity because of the election of Obama to see race through an entirely new lens and framework. And that's a deeply Baha'i idea in an article that's on the Associated Press Wire. I did another article about this idea. As soon as Obama got, when Obama was running, it's first black president. And then when he became president, this idea became popularized that, he's not really black because he has the white mom, so he's the first, he's not really, he's sort of, it was like cling on to it. I actually timed it, and I was watching the network that shall be not named, and at 11:08 on election eve, he had only been president for 8 minutes when they said, well, actually, you might not want to call him black because he's got a white mom. I was like, well, that didn't take long. But this was I'll wrestle with the subject and we'll talk about it. This was something that I wrote in that article. Obama considers himself black because the world sees him that way. But the world has changed since the young Obama found his place in it. Intermarriage and the decline of racism are dissolving ancient definitions. And so that verb dissolving, I got straight from Abdul Baha. And he was writing about how Baha'is encourage intermarriage. If I recall correctly, Louis Gregory, Abdul Baha encouraged, and that might, maybe urged him to marry a white woman. I guess urged is closer. So I was able to put Abdul Baha into an article about Obama on the Associated Press Wire, Abdul Baha's ideas. This is what I strive to do in my job. Also, I try to write about people who have non-political solutions to our problems. For example, Michelle Alexander, author of The New Jim Crow. It's not widely known that she recently left academia and went to work at the Union Theological Seminary in New York City. Wow, that's interesting. And she put on a Facebook post explaining her move. Solving the crises we face isn't simply a matter of having the right facts, graphs, policies, or funding. And I no longer believe we can win justice simply by filing lawsuits, flexing our political muscles, or boosting voter turnout. Yes, we absolutely must do that work, but none of it, not even some form of political revolution, will ever be enough on its own. Without a moral or spiritual awakening, we will remain forever trapped in political games. Yo! What? Now, have you seen any Michelle Alexander articles recently? No. Maybe because I wanted to interview her. She was like, get back to me next semester. But I intend to write about her. So we have to look for these opportunities. This is not a political solution to what's going on. So in the media, if we can look to more of these non-political solutions, then we will begin to show people, readers, the audience, there's other ways to address this. There's other ways. And I think that finally, the biggest thing that I try to do in my work, and that I hope that we can encourage more of the media to do, and the media will understand, is to demonstrate love and forbearance for everyone, even the people who are standing consciously, deliberately, or unconsciously in the way of racial progress. Engage with everyone. Allow people to have their say even if you disagree with them, especially if you disagree with them. Look for the humanity in everyone. As Ambassador Young said earlier, relate to each and every person, no matter their politics, no matter their racial beliefs, no matter if they are racist, relate to each and every person as a child of God. So those of us in journalism have to highlight the humanity of all of our subjects. And like the ambassador said, the key to victory in sports, in journalism, and in the quest for racial justice is unity. Anything that detracts from that unity holds us back from achieving the goal. One of the best things that happens in my job is when I'm interviewing someone and I ask them a question and they say, I never thought about it that way before. So we in the media have to encourage people to think in new ways. That's the opportunity that we have. And I'd like to close with a quote from the Universal House of Justice that really highlights this opportunity, and then hopefully you guys will have some questions or some comments. Though devastating in their effects, the forces of disintegration tend to sweep away barriers that block humanity's progress, opening space for the process of integration to draw diverse groups together and disclosing new opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. Thank you.